Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our second podcast. Chris is looking very festive with his Christmas jumper. We've got a very large array of British biscuits. It's a very British moment. I had quite a few things that I wanted to discuss. I had more than a few options, but what the BBC said at 7 o'clock this morning had to cause me to send a message to Chris. I'm going to let him give his opinion. Go on, you speak first.
Only because I actually know you're going to cause chaos. Well, obviously,
the Prime Minister has basically fucked up our country's economy.
Yeah,
it's perceptive that 3 out of the 4 communicators. So we're talking about the BBC referring towards our economy for those that who are generally kept up with the legacy press. And my critical problem is that the Prime Minister made huge amounts of promises beforehand on his entire manifesto, betrayed all of it to get the economy working. And realistically, if the projections are right, okay, I'll caveat that because Chris thinks I can be a little too savage.
Because you're looking at the broader picture,
yeah,
which is what I think they're trying to portray.
Yeah.
Which I can understand. But since 2 out of 3 are predicting that it's going to go wrong, it's very concerning.
Yeah, like our economy didn't grow from July.
It was stable for a while. But then September, it's gone down on decrease.
Yeah.
It's flatlined.
Yeah.
And it's on the verge of going negative.
Which would put us back into a recession. Because our economy growth has been horrific for several years. And that's the reason we got rid of the Tories, relatively speaking. It's because if you looked at the graph before that, we were in negative for 3 quarters.
And then we bounced back.
Yeah.
But then, obviously, they are saying it could be a reflection of the fact that obviously change of government where it's gone down, it may bounce back up.
But he betrayed every promise he made on the manifesto on the principle that he was going to fix our economy.
And the fact that within 3 months it has gone down to 0 is concerning.
It's more than concerning. It means that every leftist that he'd promised to, I need to fix the economy first. I can't make any of my promises until I fix the economy. And I'm a centre leftist, I want the weakest parts of society protected. The people who are genuinely vulnerable. We're not talking, doleys who don't fucking work. We're referring towards people who are genuinely have difficulties, like disabled people. We should give as much help as we can to the disabled to let them work or exist in our society to the best of their ability within their disabilities. And I'm very fond of that point of view, especially when it comes towards society. Really is judged by its weakest members. And he's failed. Fundamentally, I'm more than happy to throw the Prime Minister under the bus, because from my perspective, he made all these promises. Many of my fellow centre leftists went out and campaigned for him. Get rid of the Tories was a very powerful thing, but there was a lot of reasons why people went to help him. And he betrayed all of those. He said, well, the economy's a mess, we've got huge black holes, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool, we'll buy that for now. Why is the economy tanking after you said you made that your focus?
Because he hasn't followed through. He hasn't been paying attention.
Yeah.
It's either that or he's playing a very dangerous game where it could bounce back, but going by what the professionals are saying, it's not going to look very good. And if it does bounce back, it's not going to be in the numbers that he's probably hoping for if he is playing a very dangerous game.
This is true, but the fundamentals is this bounces back to what Nigel Farage said recently. And I can't stand, for caveat, I can't stand Farage. I think he's like Marmite. He's either people love him or people hate him. And I'm on the group that we need migrants because we don't have enough population in our country. I'm a firm believer that we need migration in a sensible way. I'm not having any agreements with my English cousins who say we should have a sensible migration system, but we have to acknowledge the fact that we need a sensible migration. And people like Farage are pipe dreamers. And this rolls into the fact that lunatic across the Atlantic Ocean, one Elon bloody Musk, wants to put £100 million in our country's things through his Twitter account or X account here in the UK, because he can't technically give £100 million as a foreign billionaire.
No.
But he has the £100 million to put in Nigel Farage's war chest. I'm sorry, Chris, I realise that you think someone should be hard on the border. Absolutely. Nigel Farage might be okay if he was the border czar. As the fucking Prime Minister? Do you really want that man as Prime Minister?
No, because it would tank it.
Yeah. Because every migrant in the country despises him. And as
we need somebody in power that realises that everything needs stability, which means balance between everything.
Yeah, of course.
Because if you don't have balance, it's going to go one way or the other, and one way or the other is disastrous.
Yeah.
Regardless which way you look at it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not even open for question, in my opinion. I don't think foreign billionaires of any stripes should have any influence in this country. We don't have enough billionaires here in this country anyway, so I think that's a good thing. Because that means there's less of them to be able to influence party. Billionaires can buy elections. That is the fucking scary thing. There's a whole room of problems where I have the idea.
No, but all the ones here got their own outspoken ideas as the ones that are in America.
You don't hear much about the British billionaires, and that's a good thing. They're quiet.
Which means that they're thinking more sensibly than actually trying to push their opinions upon anybody.
Yeah, and they're quietly having conversations with the Tories or with the Labour ministers quietly on the side. They're not making noise like Elon bloody Musk thinks that he has a moral right to purchase an election. And I'm sorry, I'm against that. I'm against not even.
That takes the meaning out of having an election.
Yeah, exactly. If you can buy elections, you've defeated the very point.
Our votes don't matter at all. Our voices don't even matter.
Yeah.
And see, America is big on freedom of speech.
Oh, they're not. It's bullshit.
Going by social outlets, they're big on freedom of speech.
They're not. They're big on freedom of speech as long as it doesn't impact upon their economical values. That's a very pointable factor. I'm opposed to any ideas of billionaires affecting our economy, not our economy, our elections. I believe that is solely the right and privilege of the people who pay tax. And let's be frank, billionaires don't. You don't get to be a billionaire by paying your fair share of tax.
You work the system so you don't pay the tax.
Exactly.
That's the reason why you become a billionaire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying that I'm not. We're not having the conversation at the moment of whether that's moral or wrong or right. I did that last podcast. We spoke very clearly about why I think the idea that tax dodging is legal tax dodging is a fucking problem. But if anybody wants to see that from this one, please go see the previous podcast. I fundamentally find that foreign or any billionaire, British billionaire has more of a skin in the game. You know what I'm saying? A British billionaire lives here. He's a part of us. To some degree, I can kind of let that one go.
If anything, he's going to more likely make it affect him after the election by making sure that whatever the person that's in power has said to do, actually does it so it benefits him. Then will then also correspond in benefiting us.
Yeah. You see, and they'll be more careful about it.
Yeah.
They'll go to the specialist. You know, you see all these Labour and Tory conferences that go on. You know that there are multi-millionaires or billionaires in them. We know this. It's just common sense tells you they are. But if those are British billionaires, that's fine. People like Elon Musk or anybody, I'm not actually. I don't even feel like I'm picking on Elon Musk. I'm not. It's because he's in the news is why I'm mentioning it. That someone like Nigel Farage, a man who is incredibly controversial in this country,
he has probably one or two decent points which have faded into existence due to his extreme view of everything else. But
and he's the person who thinks we should sell the NHS.
He can fuck off.
Yeah. That's another thing. He wants to utterly privatise the NHS instead of the Tories and Reform who've got little bits of the NHS privatised. That's the point. There is sections of the NHS now that are privatised as we speak. And yet one of Nigel Farage's most extreme views, in my opinion, is the selling of all national assets. I want to go the opposite way. I want to retake our water, our power, our train lines. I think it's about time we renationalise the whole fucking lot. Because they belong, they were paid for and built by the British people. Every time
National Rail starting to become nationalised again.
He's talking about it, but I don't know if he'll implement it. This is Starmer. The man. We judge him by what he actually does, which is fuck all at the moment.
If he actually nationalises the railway system,
he might buy himself some peace and quiet from me. For a grace.
If he does that, that might be a saving grace if everything else goes wrong.
True, but let's be fair. We should judge Starmer by what he does, not by what he says, because he talks out of his fucking arse. In my honest opinion, the man is one of the biggest liars we've had since Boris Johnson. And that is a steep order.
That's a claim there.
From my perspective, Boris Johnson has never stopped lying. Boris Johnson opens his mouth, he's lying. Keir Starmer isn't that bad yet, but he's coming close to it. He's failed on every promise he's made in his manifesto, and now he's failing on the fucking economy, and it's a disaster. Anyway, let's move on. I believe you had a point that you wanted to raise as your thing today.
Which one?
Pick one. Pick one you said you wanted to talk about.
All right. Well, completely go the opposite side to the economy. We'll discuss dating. Dating in this country.
Yeah,
dating in this country. On how it's actually changed from when we first started actually pursuing women. I think it's changed massively radically and is getting a bit stupid.
Beyond. I liked a comment I saw online one time of a lady when they were talking about dating apps, and she said, what we should do is get all the dating apps together and put them together and call them What's Left. I thought that was brilliant. And of course, when I looked up at that quote, it was a black woman. Of course, because they're so blunt. Who's left? What's left? The dating, this is one of the reasons we Muslims don't date. You talk about marriage, you have a conversation with their family, the person we call their wali, who is basically their parent, their guardian, and you have a conversation. It would be no more different than what me and you would have a conversation. Well, absolutely different from how me and you have a conversation. me and your conversation should never be raised in a Muslim household. Because of me. This is no shit. My noble English gentleman here is nothing like that. He's trying to motivate the Irishman. I'm not casting shades at you, sir.
No, I'm the one that's trying to rein you in, not the other way around.
But yeah, in Muslim society, what we do is we have a conversation with the prospecting bride's father. We talk about what we can provide. We talk about housing. We talk about what we do for a living. We discuss how we will provide for the daughter. And then it will move on to another stage where you'll have coffee. And you'll sit down, you'll go to a coffee shop or something like that. And there'll still be the guardian around. You know what I'm saying? There'll be a guardian or another third person. So that there's no, because we're a religious community, there's no hanky-panky, there's none of that business. Now, I know that doesn't fit for a modern British society, but modern British society doesn't have dating anymore. It has hookup culture.
No, because literally, as you stated, obviously the way the Muslim side does it, that's structure and standards, which, as a British people, we did have in the past. But it has been watered down,
absolutely
dismantled by outside influence, which is I'm sorry, I'm going to piss people off, but it is the transgender community which has watered it down massively of late. Think about this clearly, yeah? I was literally just scrolling through some stuff on Instagram, and I was like, oh, she looks pretty nice. And then only for the camera to pan down and realise it has a dick. Which means it's a woman, it's a man. Yeah, very distinctly a man. May look like a female, but it has many genitalia, so it is a bloke. Yeah.
Controversy.
Which literally.
Are you sure you're still a white? You're still sure you're a British white man at this point? Because you're about to get savaged by everybody.
He's the Andrew Tate of Britain. Not even close. I don't have the money.
Yeah, absolutely. All the looks, the height, the body. You ain't got none of that. Yeah, be offended. That was intended.
Looks and body are determined based on person's preferences. Height, I've got nothing to do about. That's purely genetic. Yeah. Can't do nothing with that. Your height is what you've been given with.
And deal with it. There are women out there who like their short kings.
I'm not short. I'm really short. I'm not short.
I'm not short. I'm short. I think the dating culture in Britain is dead. In general, it's a hookup culture. It is returned to a society where they want casual sex constantly. If
you're trying to go out into the current dating scene in the UK, looking for, as I call, like family, kids, long-term relationship,
get a religious community. Stop fucking around.
Literally, you've either got to partake in some sort of religious community within your natural beliefs anyway, in order to get what you're after, or you're walking through a minefield, which is booby-tracked against you.
Or, in realistically, I think a lot of British middle-class men are starting to realise, become passport bros. Go abroad, find yourself an Eastern European girl. It's brutal, but it's true. Because most British women do not want marriage and kids.
There's very few that do.
Yeah. I mean, and we're not trying to be savage or nasty.
I've actually found a massive distinction. Standard single British females want the hookup culture,
yeah,
but then end up, for whatever reason, not using protection, not being careful, getting with the wrong dude, whatever, end up having a child, and then want the marriage system to benefit them.
Which it doesn't, because 90%, like, and I know it's a trope, but unfortunately it's a real trope. Most men do not want to take on single mothers. In Islam, we're encouraged to. We are encouraged to assist the Muslim community by, like, revert men will come in. Like, I think 4 of the previous marriage conversations I've had have been with single mums who are also reverts themselves. So they're both, when I say revert, basically white British Muslims. So there is the growing community of us. There's about maybe 240,000 of them across the UK, which, you know, is pretty fucking good when you think about how small the Muslim community is across the UK as it is. You know, there's about 3.5 million of them. So we're doing well. But most reverts have an extreme difficulty finding themselves into what is a culture, you see, this is one of those dark sides about marriage as Muslims. It is very difficult for a white Muslim man to get married. Incredibly, especially in the ethnic communities. And I'm not making shades. There are deep fears and reservations about, is he a Muslim? Does he practice properly? You know, the fathers get their backs up because they're worried. They love their daughters very dearly. This is not an attack specifically upon.
It's them protecting what they
hold dear, because Muslim men are told to cherish your wives and daughters above all other things, more than pearls and jewels. There was a quote from Muhammad Ali. When he was talking to one of his daughters, he said, "I value you more than the gold and gems and pearls of the whole earth. And this is why I ask you, my daughter, to cover yourself, because I value you far more precious than all these things." And that was from Muhammad Ali, the boxer. I'm pretty sure that was a quote from Muhammad Ali. I'm sorry if that's wrong, but it's a beautiful quote that I saw, and I thought that describes Muslim protectiveness to their daughters. So for a white revert, it's very difficult to marry ethnically. If you want to marry a British Pakistani, you have got to jump through a lot of hoops. I've spoken to a couple of prospecting sisters on the very, very things. I've probably had more marriage proposable ideas than you have, and that's scary because we're both pursuing the same thing. And your pool is so much larger than mine.
I'm not exactly pursuing anything at the moment, but
no. But when you were, your pool was roughly 20 to 25 million white single British women.
I was lucky even I got a look in when I was looking. Yeah.
20 to 25 million British. I think that's actually less. Actually, I think when you were doing that, it was probably 19 million single British white women. My pool is 200,000 reverts, or a portion of 3 million Muslims. And I've had 5 prospects of marriage. How many you had? Oh, my days.
But then I'm being...
You've got a very type that you want.
I've got certain criteria that needs to be met, but that's my personal preference.
Yeah, of course. But your pool is massive.
And my pool is massive. So obviously, naturally, I know out of the 19 plus million, obviously, my criteria I'm after is going to reduce significantly.
Yeah.
But then I'm fine with that, because the fact I know for a fact if it's to happen, it will happen, it will come along.
Well, one moment. Caveat, there might not be 19 single British women here. I might have that entirely wrong. It might be as low as 9 million. I was just thinking 19 million, that's a lot considering how much of our country is. It might be as low as 9 million. I don't know the immediate...
Well, it's in the millions.
Yeah, it's in the millions. It's a hell of a lot more than there is in the entire Muslim community.
Yeah.
And the perspective that I wanted to make clear was your dating pool is massive, but your prospects are vastly reduced.
Yeah, but that's because of the fact yours has standards and structure. Mine does not. No. It is very much a free-for-all.
I say it again, Chris, come to Islam.
know my thoughts on that.
You're a young man. I mean, many of these Somalian sisters, they like their short kings.
You know my thoughts on religion.
This is true. You're not. I'm getting there. To all of my Muslim people of the 14 people that are subscribing, they're probably all Muslim currently. And we thank you very kindly for everyone who has subscribed and watched that video. We do appreciate it. Yeah, the dating scene in the UK is horrific. There's no reservation about that. The dating scene has a lot to be answered. I think in reality you have to move out of the UK if you're looking for a long-term partner. I think from your point of view, as what I was a Western man, I wouldn't try. It's brutal. I don't know of any white, English, Welsh, Irish, Scottish women, even amongst the now large ethnic community of Czechs and Poles, that I'd want to date if I was non-religious.
I've actually had more luck in the dating scene going through family and acquaintances, for family and friends, than on dating apps or anything else.
Oh yeah, no, dating apps useless.
Yeah.
No,
or even just, as I call it, just going out to a nightclub and try doing it that way.
I wouldn't even. They're meat factories for sex. That's all they are.
Yeah. Hence the reason
nightclubs the nightclub culture is dying, and that's a good thing in my perspective. The nightclub culture is dying horribly.
Well, you're really surprised?
No.
Because if it's a hookup culture, and obviously people want to make sure they know who they're hooking up with,
you can't do that from
and the influence that the outside things are having, blokes now going into a nightclub and going, oh, she looks nice, but hang on, is she actually a female?
Or is she a raving feminist? Fellow Nazis!
Or is it a case of the fact of, I can hook up with her, but then is it going to cause me more grief down the line because of her
is this from experience?
My experience stays covered.
I apologise, I can't spill the beans. Swore an oath.
My experience is vast and wide.
And a lot of train wrecks.
A lot of learning opportunities have arose.
Learning opportunities, fucking hell.
I will not be making those mistakes again.
Yes, those train wrecks, I've had to lift him off the train lines to take him away. Head-on collisions, yeah, 5 or 6. Sean says, Chris, you know you're heading to a disaster, but she's so good. You should see her in bed, Sean. And now you've crashed. But I liked her.
I've yet to actually even recall where I said she's good in bed to you. I would never discuss that with you.
Liar.
No.
The only reason you would be still with so many of these women is because they got to be good in the sack, because the mental anguish is too much. The mental anguish is too much. There's no justificationable reason why you would do it.
I will reaffirm that will never be discussed.
That's like I said, the crazier they are, and we know they're the crazies that you like.
Shh. I don't want them coming up and causing more fucking shit, alright?
Well, that's the point. We ain't mentioning names. We're not mentioning names, dates, times, or anything like that. But yeah, your train wrecks have been train wrecks.
You can't say much.
Yeah, I know, but I'm Muslim these days. I've been celibate all the time I've been Muslim.
Yeah, but before then, train wrecks.
No, because train wrecks means there was something to recover. Mine were full ongoing blowouts, mate. We're talking.
Yours was head-on collisions with no recovery. Let's say that right.
My British dating life was horrific. I ran off to become a Muslim.
I just decided to sit back and sort myself out before I do anything. And
yeah, your prospects still haven't improved, have they?
But I'm not looking, so I don't care at the moment.
This is true. This is very, very true. Moving on. Britain selling shadow storms to Ukraine. Long-range missiles.
Still stand by the point. If it's someone else's war, we should not be getting involved.
It's not a NATO country. It's not a NATO country. That's
regardless whose war it bloody is. We should not be involved.
With NATO, we have treaties.
Yeah.
If someone was to attack Poland, we'd have to do something about it.
But that's an agreement we've entered into.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even then, I'd still be like, we have to do, but what do we have to do? Because in fact, if anything, we should be aiming to preserve human life, not to wipe it off the map.
That's the problem. War profiteering is all about how many weapons you can sell, how much how much blast can you cause. The shadow storms shouldn't be. I don't think any of these long range missiles should be involved. I don't think we should be involved in the Ukrainian conflict. On the principles that realistically it is a continual westward expansion by America's corporate empire. Let's call it what it is.
It's it, people trying to get their foot in the door to where they want to be.
Yeah. In essence, the American corporations and their various agencies want to be on Russia's border.
Why?
And that is going to make people like Putin, who is a Cold War veteran, who is a KGB master spy, a fucking dangerous man, a man with one of the largest nuclear stockpiles on the planet, nervous.
Why would you want to be on the doorstep of someone that can cause that much issues? If anything, I'll be holding peace treaties and negotiations to make sure that nothing ever disturbs the peace. And then obviously, whatever the conflict is between Russia and Ukraine, I'd literally just be making a phone call saying we need to discuss what's going on because of the fact obviously you're going to be affecting stuff here, and have a polite discussion about it.
The problem being is Putin knows, and regardless of what we think, we are fighting him. Europe and America are by proxy fighting Russia. Russia is holding a fight with all of Europe and America. And we know this because we're supplying them equipment. We're teaching them how to use the equipment. Even if we don't, hypothetically, I'm not going into the Russian propaganda that there are boots on the ground of Britain's fighting the Russians. But we are fighting a proxy war by the vast amount of resources we've poured into the Ukraine. And this is where I agree with the incoming President Trump. There has to be a limit.
There needs to be boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Ukraine can win this war, even with all of Europe in his corner. I think this is a lost cause because you've angered. The bear is massive. I think it's got like 300 fucking million people. It's one of the largest powers on the. Yeah, it's a crumbling old power, but it's a fucking power. It's more powerful than any single one European country.
Right, because it holds a lot of land.
Land, resources, manpower, hours. They can engage in infantry warfare.
As I call it, a country that large, naturally going to have their own divisions within their country that believe what they should do and what do. But if, for example, you say if the rumours are true and there are British troops or American troops, whatever, on foot fighting Russians on the ground, that's just going to spark World War III and just unite the entire Russia.
It already has, I mean, there are many Russians who don't like Vladimir, huge amounts, and Vladimir knows this. But the problem being is, very few of them are willing to start something while the fate of Russia is being hanged in the balance. Russia is not some small power. She's not some small nation. Like Syria, when Syria collapsed, that was a blow to Russia's pride, but it isn't that much of a massive impact on Russia itself. It's more like psychological warfare. And I'm absolutely certain that America and Israel had a hand in helping that. There was some kind of either intel or information or visuals about the fatigue or props or something like that given to the HTC, I think they're called nowadays. They're ex-terrorists. And I don't fucking trust them. I'm a Muslim and I don't trust them. They worked for Al-Qaeda. They worked for ISIS. They should not be running a fucking country.
So why would you...
And our governments are talking to them.
Why are we entrusting terrorists of whatever form with a country?
I know, it's mad. It's fucking mad. And I'm Muslim, I'm telling you that. I do not trust the fucking terrorists. I don't care that they've turned over a leaf. I don't care that the West wants to engage in them. No, fuck off. They're terrorists. They should not be in charge of a country. They're as bad, as in my opinion, as the fucking warlord that they just removed. And I'm not an Assad supporter. Let me be very, very clear. I think that cunt needs to go as well. Unquestionably. But in terms of Britain being involved in all these countries, all of these conflicts, we're either giving intel, we're giving fighter support, we're giving supply support. We just need to stop fucking sticking our nose in every fucking war around the world.
Don't need to.
None of our business.
We don't need to.
We are not a superpower anymore. We're barely a fucking power. Our economy is collapsing, and yet our Prime Minister...
The fact our economy is on the verge of going wrong again says to me we need to pull ourselves in, sort ourselves out.
Sort our own country and our own fucking business out.
Sort our stuff out so we stand strong, so...
help yourself.
Yeah, help yourself before you help
the other people.
Yeah.
Because if you're stable, then you are with a position of strength to help others.
Yeah.
We're not stable. Britain's nowhere fucking... America itself is hollowed out economically when it comes towards the general population of the US. Many of their cities are crumbling, their infrastructure crumbling. And I love the American people, they're lovely people. But their government has turned so much onto the international stage and what international corporations want, that barring a very few small cities or medium-sized cities that the US elite want to have running well, the rest of America has been fucking abandoned by them. It's like the corporate elite of the West don't give a fuck about anybody else in the West.
Because they just want to get richer.
Yeah.
And control and have more power.
It's mad. It's fucking mad. And I think the fact that we are supplying these Shadow Storm weapons to the Ukrainians is madness. It's begging problems. And if we do have forces on the ground in the Ukraine fighting the fucking Russians,
that's literally steps to World War III.
Spark problems, mental fucking spark problems.
Just should not be happening. Should not be happening on any level.
State of the NHS. We touched on this earlier.
Needs improving massively. But how is that going to improve if our economy is going to be tanked?
Again, ties in. The state of the NHS.
This is where immigration comes a good part into play. Because the fact they can fill in the roles which
they do, and much of our NHS is run by immigration.
Fill in the roles which we currently do not have people trained for.
We don't have anywhere near enough nurses.
Yeah.
Orderlies, carers, doctors. I mean, I think our junior doctors are starting to catch up now. But that goes to another factor that I wanted to mention involving our police numbers. Even now, we don't have police numbers we've been improving year on year now, but our police numbers are still below 2010. Fucking madness. 15 fucking years later, we are still below 2010 levels of policing. Absolute fucking madness. What was the other thing that you wanted to talk about? Come on.
Or OnlyFans.
Go on, man. It's the whole point about our podcast is to talk about these problems. Go on, give it a shot.
Literally, you can't do anything on social media now without someone promoting OnlyFans, which I think is just disgusting. I can understand they're trying to make money and everything else, but then have they actually really thought about the consequences of going into that side of business? Because as we mentioned in the last video, it's basically the new form of porn.
Yeah, it is. OnlyFans is the oldest game in the book. Yeah, it's a form of prostitution. Whether people like it or not.
Apart from where it's obviously in the past, it's obviously been through like film industries and whatnot, which obviously had their standards and everything else.
They didn't have many.
They didn't have many. I think they've improved their standards, but then obviously it's morphed into OnlyFans, which is a lot more. It's called independent filmmaking. They would classify that as now, but it's come to the point where it's just flooding social media.
No, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's at a point now where we are reaching a point of
which only inspires hookup culture even further.
Yeah, and this falls back to what I said in the last podcast about how the advertising on social media of this type of material, because there are so few blockers protecting those that are under the age of consent, that they are seeing more and more of this.
Where is it that's got the case of fact?
There's no legal requirement on the age of use of Instagram. You know that, don't you?
Yeah.
So a 12-year-old
I thought they was trying to set that up.
No, it failed.
It failed?
Yeah,
did it fail? What the fuck did it fail?
12-year-olds can use Instagram. 12-year-olds can use Instagram right now. There is no law preventing a 12-year-old having a mobile phone and having Instagram.
I honestly think social media should be like driving. Not allowed to go on it until you're 16.
Oh, you old fart. No, you're kicking us off social media. TikTok has a bit more of a better legal standing. I don't know the legal age of
parental
TikTok.
controlled accounts.
But that's the problem. If you leave it in the parental control, most parents in the United Kingdom right now would rather give their kid a phone or a tablet and tell them to be quiet while they're doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, but then that's where you can then turn around and say, right, parental control needs to be thoroughly set up so you say what they can and cannot say.
And again,
put that within the settings.
And again, that's placing the reliance upon the parents, who, if we leave the British people, British parents, to guide themselves, they have been, in the last 25 years, fucking useless. And I'm sorry, the bulk of the British public, we're talking not individuals, not individual areas of the UK, but the British white majority of the population do not police their children on social media or modern technology. We've both seen it. We've seen, when we worked in the food industry, we've seen parents passing on a pad while they're talking to their partners, or they're on their own phones, and no inclination whatsoever to what the kids are doing on those pads. And that is systemic across the entire United Kingdom. In the British
I've got so much control over that for our kids.
Of course, absolutely, because you understand the dangers that go into it. But the reality is, most parents don't. They don't. They have this perception of an adult mind looking at a phone or material. Oh, that's porn. I'm not interested in that. But then, what happens when their 12-year-old's doing it? Same app, same material, same data feed.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, of course.
Extremely dangerous.
But nobody wants to talk about it. No one's willing to engage the conversational positions in how dangerous OnlyFans and hookup culture and the decline in social standards of community have disintegrated here in the UK. The community life in the UK has absolutely vanished. You find it in some of the small parts of the Polish, the Ukrainian. I've got to give the British-Ukrainian fucking community a massive thing. The ones that have come here, more than happy to have them. They have done wonders. Like half the Christmas stuff you see around in Gloucestershire, where we live, that's all being set up by British Ukrainians and Poles and that. No, seriously. The ethnic minority groups of the UK are doing more for the Christmas services. Now, I'm Muslim. I don't support the idea behind it, but the tradition behind it is very important for British culture, and it's not the British people who are doing it.
Why not?
Fatigue, social collapse, disregard for society. I'm not smart.
I think it's change of opinion.
No, I don't think. I think tradition has.
Should I say, change of moral obligation?
Yeah, that would be more appropriate. Change of moral obligation is probably the right perception. Many of the traditions that you and I grew up with when I was Christian and you were pseudo-Christian, that you were Christianical, led by society, not necessarily religious.
And mine's built more on case of fact of help your neighbour.
Yeah. But that is a Christological behaviour.
Yeah.
That's expected of you. Help your neighbour is a very Christian thing. Be kind, be courteous, be gentle. Those morals are not shared by the bulk of the country anymore. You only have to walk through London and watch how people step past starving, drug-addicted people. Even if you're not going to put money in them, buy them food. We Muslims are obliged. You see someone and you have change in your pocket and you think they're hungry, you buy them food. You're required. It's Islamically proposed to look after the weakest parts of society. And this is why the country has gotten more and more cynical and more self-destructive as the years have rolled on. Because there is no unifying central culture anymore. And that's a negative thing. And even as a Muslim, I say that is a problem. If you were to sit down and ask
it reverts straight back to your point over the case of fact of you're only as strong as your weakest member.
Yeah. And the fundamentals of our society have shifted to pure capitalism to such a degree that we have lost what it means realistically to be British. If I was to sit here and ask you, how would you describe being British?
Looking after your family.
That's not British.
No, unless it is in my book, but...
No, I know, but if you were to describe what does it mean to be British? How would you describe being British on a week by week? It's very difficult for modern people to do that. I've taken months to ask this question myself.
Damn.
Yeah. How would you describe? So I'm a foreigner. I've never known anything about the British. I don't know anything about the British Empire. Nothing. Let's say I'm an alien that comes down, A'udhu billah, and says, "What does it mean to be British?" How would you, Christopher, explain what it means to be British?
Modern days, there's nothing that separates us to be British.
You see, now for me, I would say it was by the kindness of society, the willingness to help each other, the fraternity of family, the driving a German vehicle whilst eating Indian food, whilst drinking Dutch beer. And I know that sounds a bit cliche, but that is Britain today, relatively speaking. Many people say, "Oh, you're just quoting a rather poor joke or quote," but realistically, it is. That is a very good description. Buying, I don't know, Russian materials, watching American movies. Britain is incredibly, like, if you were to take multicultural, society away from Britain, what Britain do you have? If you were to take all of the migrationable things that have grown around our country today,
the only thing that springs to mind is tea drinkers,
and even that comes from fucking America and India and China. That's not even British. We don't grow our own tea.
It's like tea and biscuits. It seems to be set in. fact, it's a
very British thing, but it doesn't.
I know. Obviously, parts of it come from everywhere else, but it's.
Yeah, no.
It's just become
the combination of it is part of a British psyche, absolutely.
Yeah.
And see, some people would say also fish and chips, but
can't go wrong with fish and chips. I'm sorry, you just cannot. You cannot go wrong with fish and chips.
You're thinking about that for tea tonight, aren't you? Thinking, he's got me thinking now. I'm thinking fish and chips.
No, I've already got tea set for later.
But yeah, I think that if you were to talk about British culture, you will very, very quickly lose most people in being able to describe what it means to be British. And I would say being British is walking down the street, shaking hands to your Polish neighbour, saying assalamu alaikum to the Somalians as you pass them, as they're helping the soup kitchens for the poor and the weak and the needy. Being British is about the multitude of different micro cultures in Britain, but we are losing a gelling centre to us. And we need to restore that.
We're losing our core.
Yeah. And I think that needs to be that. And I know that's hard for people to actually sit there and acknowledge, but we are losing the core of what it means to be British, and we need to rediscover that as a nation. And I think that's a very, very key factor in my honest opinion.
British people back in the day had very high standards for certain things, and that is slowly.
Like when we were kids, if a politician did what Boris Johnson did, they'd have fallen on their sword. They'd have resigned.
They would have gone, sorry, I messed up.
Yeah, and resigned. And Keir Starmer would never have been allowed to do what he did 30 years ago. If he came close to betraying his manifesto as a Labour member, he would have been out the door. The Labour members would have lynched him. And the very socio-political behaviours we've had for decades have changed so dramatically that we don't have a social core anymore. This comes back to the nucleus family. This comes back towards the lack of nuclear family. And many British Christians would probably say the lack of Christianity. And as a Muslim, I'm going to sit here and say this. We would prefer a Christian Britain, as we Muslims reside in, than the agnostic, atheistic hookup.
It covers structure and support and stability throughout the course of
absolutely. Because we object to a lot of what is being portrayed by this atheistic, amoral hookup culture belief system that the UK has at the moment. Many British Muslims would say to you, we would prefer to be living in a Christian country. If Britain was Christian, the British Muslims would be a lot more happier. I'm telling you that now. I don't know a Muslim who'd probably disagree.
Because you both have
similar religions,
common ground to have topics on.
Yeah, and certain behaviours wouldn't be tolerated.
Yeah.
Certain behaviours and affronts that Muslims and Christians and Jews
and certain mindsets
as well.
Local youth, younger youth.
It comes towards where we have economically done everything based around money, and that's why with the current news in the BBC right now, our Prime Minister, if he has fucked up the economy, he has utterly failed.
He should be removed. If he's done that, he should be removed straight off the bat.
If the prediction comes out of the 3 out of the 4 that we saw from the BBC talking about economy, if that happens in 2025, he's got to go. Now, my fright is I don't need a Farage. That motherfucker does not need to be elected. He's a scary motherfucker when it comes towards our country's economies. Speaking about our economy and waste of use, Amazon. Amazon centres across the entire country. There's like 100 locations of them. They have 75,000 staff. They have, in the last 5 years, had 1,400 ambulance call-outs.
Where in hell are the safety regulations or rules that they should be following?
Fucking joke. And more importantly, they pay they pay less insurance, they pay less tax than you do. As a company. Amazon pays less tax than you do. Or it's something like that. I'm pretty sure it's like, or is it a couple of hundred Britons you have together? Like, they pay less tax than a selection of Britons. Madness. And they've called out our ambulances 1,400 times in 5 years. That's 280 ambulances a year.
Just based off what you said of that, the 1,400 ambulances within a year called out due to hazards or accidents that people have had in their warehouses. In any of the companies that I've worked in, if that happened, that company would not be standing.
We're from food trade.
Yeah.
And because we're from food trade, that kind of level, that Britain has a very, very high standard. But because Amazon deals with mass shipping, they've been allowed to get away with it.
But
it's basically a warehouse.
Mass shipping has more detrimental effects upon people, physically and mentally, than food.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's scary that, you know, the Amazon are allowed to talk that down. That should be more played up. There should be more Britons angry that a company that pays less tax than a small group of Britons, I don't want to say an individual, I might be wrong, that's why, a small group of Britons, and yet they call the ambulance service 1,400 fucking times, with our NHS already struggling as it is.
I want to know where the safety procedures are, seriously. Literally, any business is calling out...
Their whole management team in the UK should be fired. The whole fucking lot of them. Jeff Basingstoke should be barred from owning companies here in the UK. He should work for proxies. I generally think he should not be allowed, in my opinion...
Every single safety bloody management officer, whatever they have in all those warehouses, should be immediately sacked. And jailed.
It's a systemic... No, the directors are the ones who should be, because they're probably setting the policies. Remember, because
they should be frigging sacked and jailed and all.
Absolutely. And I'm fundamentally agreeing with this, because I think that the point that the Amazon warehouse and storage and general delivery systems, to have to call 1,400 ambulances in 5 years, 280 a year... I don't think I've ever called 280 fucking ambulances in my entire life, in the 45 years I've been on this earth. I'll be lucky
if I called it more than one hand.
I've probably called it 10 or 15 times because I was in the care trade.
You're in the care trade.
So, I mean, I've done probably 15 or 20 ambulances whilst I was a carer. And that's because they're elderly. You know, these are elderly, endangered people. That can be kind of expected. Britain can say, well, we can make amendments to that because we're expecting them to need the ambulance services more. What the fuck does a point of business need to be making 280 fucking ambulance calls a year?
Seeing as they're supposed to have procedures and policies within place to make everything smooth running and safe environment to work in.
No, fucking joke, mate. But seriously, the way that the corporate world is allowed to completely and utterly disregard our NHS, and the fact that the Tories and Reform want to sell off more of it. They want to sell off more of it because the parts of the NHS are already privatised.
Which parts are privatised?
Things like the supply chains. Things like I don't know the exact details, but parts of the NHS are directly privatised. I'll look it up for our next podcast so I can answer the question. I think it's to do with aprons, masks, food. Some of the infrastructural needs of our NHS are totally dependent on private companies nowadays. Yeah. And the problem is the Tories want to sell off more of it.
I can understand, obviously, outsourcing like food and whatnot.
No, it's more than that. It's in the similarities that involves...
Literally just selling off that section to a private company to manage that in correlation with what you're running as well.
Yeah.
That must be a logistics nightmare.
It is, and that's why it's costing us so much money. When we had a system where everything was done bulk, like the NHS would negotiate bulk, and that's why they got away with buying all of our medical equipment and all of our medicine very cheaply, because they would make a bulk purchase. You couldn't fight to lower the price. You either fuck off or you pay what we ask, and then or we'll go elsewhere in the private market. That worked. The problem was it worked so well that many of the private companies wanted to get in on the action of the NHS because it's a captured market. And this is why people like Nigel Farage talk about, oh, we should sell the NHS, it's incompetent. I'd rather put my money in a marketed-based system. Well, how does the poorest fucking person in this country get medical? Look at the poor people in America. 60% of America's deaths are from having no fucking insurance, no medical insurance.
I was going to say, literally, the people that are on the lower end of the income, NHS gets privatised, they then have to find money from somewhere to get the health insurance.
The health insurance industry should never be allowed near our NHS. I think that is a fundamental conversation we should have. No, it would destroy us. It would destroy what's left of our country's ability to look after the health of our British people. And I know it's struggling. And it's struggling because of the amount of minor privatisations that have gone around the edge. I don't know exactly what parts of the NHS have been privatised, but we know that sections of it have at an infrastructural level. And that should be terrifying for anyone that I can't look that up immediately. That I'm going to have...
The fact that you can't turn around and just go, what parts are privatised, so you know. And you can't even find that without deep diving.
I've got to do a deep dive. I've basically got to hunt down the information on where...
That's them covering their tracks.
Oh, absolutely. And it was all done by the Tories. 14 years of Tories. And the thing that Keir Starmer hasn't reversed that yet.
Why not?
Yeah, it would make entire sense. The talk about this man changing our country for the better of our country has been smoke and mirrors.
Because surely if NHS owns all that again...
It'll be able to lower all of its complex situations. They would be able to slim off so many of their middle managers, I suspect. And it's not just the middle managers that are a problem. It would then be on the supply and demand of the NHS being able to negotiate with the corporate world one-on-one. Like, you don't answer to us, you don't sell to us, you're not selling to any NHS in the UK. So if you want to be part of the NHS, the UK business, we are arguing as a block. And the companies have to do that. They want to be in the UK economy, they're going to have to negotiate with the NHS as a whole unit. And the Tories don't like that because there's not enough ability for them to take little bits off and make money.
Basically make money off them.
Yeah. You
should be making money off the NHS. NHS should be able to self-sustain. Absolutely. And give us the healthcare that should be needed.
Absolutely, and fundamentally, this is why it turns back from the previous podcast where I mentioned we must do an enormous infrastructure improvement, and that's where the tax reforms that I've mentioned in the previous podcast with you are so important because it will inject billions by making corporations actually pay some tax. You see, if Jeff Basingstoke was paying for those fucking ambulances, that cunt wouldn't be so quick to fucking call 1,400 of them in 5 years.
No, it'd be cracking down on it going,
of course. Because if we build him, if we send him a bill for those 1,400 ambulances...
You'd have a heart attack.
Fucking Jesus Christ. And it's a joke the fact that they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to rely on the actual national services that we have across the country. It's easy for people to say, oh, everyone uses the roads. But they're not paid for by big companies. The biggest wearers and tearers of our roads and safety systems of our society are the corporates. We see trucks and fucking forklifts and all these massive vehicles that are owned by individual companies that pay shit tax or no tax. It's a joke. And I'm not trying to say that to the tax man, let's take 60-70% of a company man's money. Fuck off. No one wants that. We need a new tax system where the top earners and their companies pay over $1 million, as I said before, a reasonable 30-something%. And we set that as a constitutional in stone. Then everybody else can have low tax. Like me and you can have fucking low taxes afterwards because we're earning less than £1 million. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's a win for us. It forces the companies to get out of their riders. Yes, it's going to damage the accounting industry. But I genuinely feel that the British people should do more about paying attention to how the corporate world manipulates the political world to undermine what little infrastructure we have here in the UK.
You do need to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Paying attention, I think, is a critical.
If we then turn around, obviously, implement the two-stage system, think how much money will then be reinforced back into the government to then improve on the roads that they're using and the systems that they're using as well.
Absolutely.
Think how much better the NHS will come.
Oh, of course. Even if it was only a 12 million upgrade, 12 billion upgrade, that's still 12 billion extra a year. So if they low grade conversation, watch my other podcast when I'm talking about the 12 billion, the upper end, 200. Could you imagine what we could do with 200 more billion a year in this country?
We would become a force to be reckoned with.
we wouldn't even need to be a force to be reckoned with. We could start fucking fixing the things that haven't been fixed in our life.
We would become a force to reckon with because of the fact we would then sort ourselves out and become such a strong position just as a country.
You see, this is the point, because so little of our corporations pay any tax. Any whatsoever. Everyone has a tax haven. Everyone has a tax giveaway or some kind of sweetheart deal or some kind of corporate benefit that prevents them from having to pay a corporate tax. Because admittedly, the British corporate tax is horrific. It's a horrific thing. If you look at it on its base level, I think it's like 60 to 70% for the first couple of millions, and then it can come up to fucking 80 to 90. No one's going to work for 80 to 90.
That's basically saying, all right, you earn £1 million on 80% of that, so you only get 200,000. You'd be like, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if you say you can't dodge not 35% of it, you say, okay, that's a sting, but I'm making it in the country.
So, literally, that would just be saying, right.
So, you're out your million, I want 350 grand. You're like, ouch, but it is going to pay for the roads and the societies.
But it's paying for the things that I'm using. Okay.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, I don't know. This is why billionaires and megacorps and international corporations around the world really do need to be reined in, because they are incredibly harmful to the societies they operate in. Whether it's we're struggling here in the UK right now. Think about how countries that aren't ancient powers with nuclear fucking weapons and their own navy, because there's a lot of countries around the world that don't have what we have militarily. Could you imagine trying to negotiate with international corporations if you're, let's say, and I don't mean, these are no shades to the beautiful Ecuadorian people. Ecuador doesn't have a navy. You know, I'm just taking Ecuador as an example. Ecuador has no navy, relatively speaking, about. The American Coast Guard could probably smack them, navy-wise. You know? And then we've got the Caribbean countries who utterly rely on America for defence. How do they negotiate with the same companies we're having problems with?
They won't be able to.
That should always worry people. If we are struggling to force these companies to pay taxes to us, how the fuck are they doing it in the other countries around the world? And it is important that Britain, because we're not an island, we're not an island alone anymore. This is not the
thing is,
everything is interconnected worldwide.
I'll say if we start charging corporations tax, every other country should do so as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it needs to be
unified. If you operate in a country, you should always pay tax. I don't care what the corporate man says. I don't give a flying left nutsack.
No, because you're using our facilities, you're using our land, you're using
Amazon,
our resources.
Just a perfect example I've just mentioned today in the Amazon thing.
You're using our resources, so you need to contribute to that.
Amazon should absolutely be fined for its use in the ambulances. There should be a government commission brought out. They should be fined for their abuse of our NHS. So it sends a fucking message to every other company: don't take the piss. And I fundamentally stand by that. So I mean, fundamentally, I hold irrevocably that our country needs to get a better grip on its tax, needs to tell the corporate elite that they are not taking us for a cunt anymore. We need to basically be weary of people like Nigel Farage who want to sell parts of our NHS, and not enough Britons say that. All right, they all say, oh, he's such a marvellous man, but that man hasn't actually solved any of the problems he's talked about.
All I've heard is no,
that's what I'm saying. He talks a lot about all of the immigration problems that Britain has, but he has never given us a solution. He's a member of Parliament. Or is it, in
fact, his solution is too radical that everyone would turn around and go...
No, I don't even think that. The man never comes with a solution to any of the problems he's raised. It's one of those things, if you do a deep dive in this man, you will find he's raised, legitimate conversational positions our country needs to solve. How? Why hasn't people said...
You're highlighting the problem, but you ain't offering the
solution. Yeah, well, you should say to Nigel Farage, how do you fix this? Nobody asks the Farage, how do you fix this? What would be your solution? The man waffles. He waffles. This is what I have a problem with legacy media, things like the BBC and that lot. They all treat Nigel Farage like he's some kind of important MP of the UK. He's not. He's a cretin. He represents less than 3 to 4% of our entire country's white British population. He's not even a big part of the British white population. He's a tiny, tiny part of it. And it's the same with the Brit Exodus of the Tory party that have railroaded the Tory party for 15 fucking years. They represent an ever-diminishing group of ethno-nationalists. And we need to stop giving these cunts oxygen. I don't care if swearing is a bit of a... I'm serious. We need to stop giving people who don't care about the well-being of our nation, because the ethno-nationalist's ideas are pipe dreams. Because when you look at what the ethno-nationalist wants, he wants a pure white Britain made up of English, Welsh, Scots and Irish. The country will collapse. We do not have the population to do that.
Just the way you said pure British, Irish and Scottish. There's only one name that springs to mind, and he was the cause of 2 world wars, and it did not go down well.
Of course, absolutely. And the ethno-nationalists, they try to say, we don't want to hurt anybody, we don't want to do it. But the reality is, they share the same moral grounds as Adolf fucking Hitler.
Shares the same idea that it should be pure.
Yeah. And the problem I have, and here's another thing, Douglas fucking Murray, you probably heard of that cunt online. The man makes my skin crawl, because he has no idea that without migrants in the United Kingdom, we would be fucked. And I have to say that louder than clear, we would. You take out all the brown, black, polka dot people, all of the various shades of colour from around Britain that are integrated Britons. British Christian community would collapse immediately if you left with all the blacks. The bulk of the British Christian community now is genuinely of the coloured community. It's British Jamaicans, British Africans, British Mediterraneans, dark-skinned Mediterraneans. That's a huge chunk of the British Christian community. You'd lose entire sections of your medical facilities. Once we Muslims are gone, your fucking NHS is dead. 1 in every 4 doctors are Muslim in the UK. I think 1 in every 9, one in every 6 nurses in the UK are believed to be of an ethnic minority, of one description or another. We haven't even got into the point that most of these ethno-nationalists, they don't want Poles, they don't want French, they don't want any...
they only want it just pure British.
That's the problem, we can't do that.
No,
Britain does not have the population. We've been in a decline, a populatable decline for 4 decades. As I said in this podcast, and it's madness that people think that we sociopolitically can survive on ethno-nationalism, and yet we give oxygen to ethno-nationalist politicians. Things like Nigel Farage is an ethno-nationalist. He doesn't call himself an ethno-nationalist. He is an ethno-nationalist. He caters to ethno-nationalism. And so does the European Research Group of the Tories. And their key factor was they pander to the fucking ethno-nationalists. And the ethno-nationalists are deranged. They have no idea of the well-being of a modern industrial estate. Britain will not survive an ethno-nationalist elected leadership. And Nigel Farage is absolutely... So is Douglas Murray, so are many of the others who are anti-migrant. Because anti-migrant tends to roll into anti-Muslim and anti-brown people. Without the fucking brown people on this island, this country dies. I'm sorry, I have to say it like that. There are so many infrastructures that are propped up by all of the migrants.
You're also then thinking, obviously, they're going like, it's basically they're judging it on race.
Yeah.
But then think of all the years, decades, and everything else where people from other countries come in, have moved in, set up families, which means they've integrated into the British population.
Huge sections of the British migrant community.
You do have British Jamaicans, Africans.
We do have British Jamaicans, British Africans, British... Like, there are 4th generation British Pakistanians now. I don't know if
How are you meant to get rid of that when they
don't even know about Pakistan. These 4th generation British Pakistanis have never been to Pakistan. Because I think the 4th generation are still too young to have travelled at the point.
Yeah. But they've got the...
Do you know what I'm saying?
Genetic heritage from all that line.
Yeah. 4th generation British Pakistanians. I think we're now probably approaching 3rd generation British Somalians. where the Somalian community is now producing a third generation of British Somalians.
But then they can't
go home. Yeah. Somalia's a fucking war zone.
To reinforce your point, if you used to turn around and do a DNA test or whatever, to obviously to find out obviously how much you resist and that and everything else.
Those ethno-nationalists would have a horror day because they would have many of them wouldn't be as British as they think they are.
No, because if you got all them to do that sort of thing, they would have a heart attack because of the fact that they realise, oh, hang on, I'm trying to push these people out and half my DNA resides from that.
No, of course, absolutely. And even though, and I don't tend to talk this about my grandfather, may he rest in peace, as a Catholic man, I fundamentally do not agree with what he said, but he said himself that he was an 11th generation Irishman. Now, I don't know how real that is, but if that's the case, I'm a 13th generation Irishman. But when I did my DNA, there's no more than about 17% of me. 17% of me that's Celtic, or British Celtic. And I'm apparently a 13th generation Irishman. So if I'm a theoretical pure Islander...
The only way you could be, as I call it, a pure 13th generation Irishman is if...
Your mother and father are brother and sister.
if the country would just literally wouldn't let anybody in and it was just pure Irish people there that lived there and sustained their own population.
The problem being is...
It's already been proven you can't do that because after so many generations... You would die out.
Yeah, the gene pool dies out. Migration is a point of life and society. It is a point of human evolution as a society. And with...
It's just a point of evolution, because otherwise we wouldn't come this far if we didn't turn around and integrate with other tribes.
Absolutely. We're either fucking or fighting each other across the ages of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of who we are. But the idea that I am theoretically a third... I don't believe my grandfather was correct when he said he was 11th. I think he was either exasperating or his father might have said something like he was 10th or something. I think there's a lot of story behind this. But if I was only having 17%...
I can understand Celtic, it being 13th generation of the family name.
That has been pretty much proved.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Outside of me being a bastard. Still from the same Irish nutsack, but didn't share my dad's surname. But the reality is, as a 13th generation Irishman, I'm only about 17% Irish. Technically, there is Scottish in me too. There's Welsh. There's also Spanish, Portuguese, because apparently the Portuguese had a lot of marriage between the British and Portuguese when we go back far enough. So I've got quite a bit of mix. There's a little bit of...
makes me wonder what's in my mix, but then
I swear you should do it. You should do it because it's eye-opening. Many English people who do it really do come quite shocked by it because we have been a migrant nation for 2,000 years. People don't realise that. From the Romans to the Normans to the Celts themselves.
I was going to say, just the Roman Empire expanded into Britain.
Yeah.
Which means, think of all the different...
And Rome had huge amounts of tribes.
Yeah.
The culture was Roman. You had black Romans, for fuck's sake. You had a black Roman emperor.
I was going to say, just think of the diversity within Rome.
But you wouldn't want to tell that to the ethno-nationalists. They might not like that.
They'd have a field day.
Oh, no, Romans are Italians, yeah, but they had also northern
they had one of the biggest empires
of the European area.
Of the European era, which included us.
And Africa.
Yeah.
So yeah, I believe there was one black African...
was it genghis Khan as well, which had a massive empire?
Oh, Genghis Khan. 2% of all human beings on Earth have his DNA in him.
Yeah, I was going to say
2% of the human race has his DNA in it.
That's crazy. Genghis Khan built a massive empire. Was it before? It was before the Romans, weren't it?
No, Genghis Khan's after.
Was that after? Yeah. But literally think about that: Roman Empire, Genghis Khan's empire. That is one mix.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? But that's the... Remember, and Asia is much bigger than us in population. 2% of all dudes on planet Earth have DNA from Genghis Khan. That's how much poon that man got.
That's how much he spread his seed.
And it's not even a joke. They're deadly serious. The people who study population say that there's 2% of Genghis Khan in every part of our planet.
Damn.
It's fucking mad. 2% of the human race has an ancestor with Genghis Khan. But then saying that, I think there's one king in the UK that we're all related to. Me, you go back far enough. I don't know if it's William the Conqueror or one of those ones that predates the Normans.
Yeah.
But there's a British king that everybody who is ethnically British are related to.
If you trace the tree back far enough.
Yeah, if you trace the tree far enough, and that's because there are the families and communities and nations got smaller. So someone was connected to that king somewhere, and it's mad. It's mad when you think about how tribes and nations merge and forge and move themselves forward. And I fundamentally believe that the greatest danger we've got with the instability we've got in the UK as we wrap up our podcast today is people like Nigel Farage, dog whistling ethno-nationalists who have no fucking idea how to run our country. And they are such a tiny minority of our nation that we should be very scared of how much popularity their voice is given. Because if the ethno-nationalists ever win an iota of power, this country, if you think it's bad now, it's going to the fucking shits really quickly. Because I can tell you this now, British Muslims don't like the way they're being treated now. We don't, we don't like the way that the press refers to us, the community. If we get someone like Nigel Farage in charge, we'll be gone. And I promise you the UK will feel the loss of the British Muslim community.
Quite a few of the latest groups that popped up will feel the heat and all.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, no.
To be fair, I'm not worried about them. they're not my problem.
I'm not worried about them either.
But when you're dealing with someone like Farage, you have to understand the incredible danger. Not him himself, but the fucking people that flock around him. And it's a cult of personality, and it makes him very, very dangerous. Because if they fill his head with enough pipe dreams, oh, you'll be a great prime minister, blah, blah, blah. What they're doing in the background is fucking scary stuff. Ethno-nationalism should always be opposed. Democracy is only 5 feet away from being destroyed in every generation. And it's mine and yours and every Briton's duty to protect the institution that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers died for.
Yeah.
On that note, thank you all for staying for our hour-long podcast. This is Chris. I'm Sean. As always, Assalamu alaikum, and as he always says, Happy Christmas or Hanukkah or...
Merry Christmas. Traditional Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, come on in, get it on. And we hope to see you all again on our third podcast in the new year. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think that went well today. I think that went very well.